Our next presentation is Hitting the Target or Targeting the Hit. Would you welcome, please, from Greenberg Direct Incorporated, Mr. Paul Greenberg.
Good morning, Las Vegas. How are you all? Are you still awake? Okay. So, my name is Paul Greenberg. I'm with Greenberg Direct. We're a direct response production company and marketer. So today we're here to talk about how we can be successful in our direct response advertising campaigns. Now, mostly I specialize in long form. I also do some short form, but there's an amazing thing. You see what happens in the business. There's a lot of people that try shows, and you see success after success from certain people and failure after failure from others. So today we're going to be talking about, if this thing works, there we go, how to hit the target, not just hit the target, but how to hit the bullseye. So we're talking about hitting the target or targeting the hit. So what is the secret? So a wise friend of mine once related to me a parable, and the parable is, there's a king. He's walking through the forest and he sees an astounding sight. Tree after tree after tree with targets drawn on them, and in the dead center of each target is an arrow firmly placed right in the center, in the bullseye. So the king comes across a little boy who's standing there with a bow in his hand, and he says, "Are you the one who shot all these arrows?" The little boy says, "Yes." So the king says, "Then how is it that you have such incredible accuracy? What is the secret to your success?" And the little boy says, "It's really quite simple. First, I shoot the arrow. Then I draw the target." So the DRTV business is notoriously fickle, and as we mentioned before, a hit is incredibly rare, and the statistics put the infomercial failure rate at 95%. It's a pretty bad success record for the business. So the question is, why are people still in the business with 95%? Well, the real question is, how is it that the same few people in the business are responsible for most of the hits? So they understand the lesson behind the parable. Most people think of an infomercial as an arrow that they're going to fire at their target audience. They assume that if only their accuracy is good enough, they'll have a reasonable chance of striking the target, and hopefully planting it somewhere near the bullseye. While that strategy certainly is an option, it's considerably unlikely to consistently bear fruit. So the parable tells us to look at it very differently. In our case, what is the arrow? The trick is, consider the customer as our arrow, and the infomercial is our target that we paint around it. This way, we greatly increase our chances of success and finding our shows largely on target almost every time. So how do we apply this practically? So we're going to remember that the target is being drawn around the arrow, so we need to know everything about the arrow's placement. Who is your audience? What do they like? How do they think? What do they spend their money on? What kind of TV shows do they watch? The trick is we orient our shows to the demographic that's actually watching. Doesn't matter how great your show is or how fantastic your product is. If they're not watching, they're not buying. So everyone knows it would be ludicrous trying to sell surfboards in Alaska, for example, during the winter. Well, there's one guy maybe that would buy it, that's not going to make a big hit for you. You need more than just this one guy to buy your product. So also, don't make your infomercial, as we talked about, don't make it look like a show that your customer would never watch. That's the fastest way to get them to change channels. So what you need to do is perfectly create the show around your audience. So we begin by drawing the bullseye around the very tip of the arrow. So we're going to start first with the yellow center of the target. So the trick is solve a real problem that the audience is experiencing at the very moment. Show them that they have a problem, and even if they may not realize it, and then clearly explain your solution. So make sure your arrow knows it belongs on your target right now. We're in a business where people need to make an impulse buying decision. They have to. Impulse buying means you need it right now, right now. So now comes the red band. Just as you are carefully positioning the target around your arrow, you must skillfully position your product around your audience. And this is where you have to go beyond saying it will solve their problems. You actually have to show and explain how it's going to do it. So a very important point is keep in mind that the audience is comprised of skeptics. You've got to show and tell just doesn't cut it anymore. You have to show and prove. You have to demonstrate why it works. Establish a belief system that explains how your customer can expect such tremendous results. So let's add the blue band. Anticipate the objections and answer every single one of them. DRTV, as we said, is based on impulse buying and overcoming a natural inclination of doubt. So before you start production, be brutally honest about the product. Pull it apart, examine all its negatives and drawbacks, and then honestly assess all the reasons that your target market don't want to buy the product. Don't be living in la la land. You have to really think, what's the reason they're not going to buy it? And then what you have to do is you have to turn those negatives, because every product has a negative, you have to turn those negatives into a positive. If your product is small, don't try and convince your audience how big it is. They're smart enough and they'll figure it out. So instead, highlight how compact and convenient it is. Now, let's move on to the white band. Don't take anything for granted. You know, many times I've screened an infomercial to a focus group, and they'll come back with questions and issues that they have. We once had a serious issue that came up. It was very interesting. They came back, and it was for the Ultimate Shopper. It was a show I did about 9 years ago. And they came back, and the focus group said, you know, it's got a battery-powered motor, so it's probably not very powerful. Now, in fact, the chopper was a plug-in unit, run-off mains, but because we weren't clear enough about it, the audience had a significant objection based on an incorrect assumption. We mentioned there, we changed the version of the show, we mentioned that it simply plugs in, and sales went up by 15%. So remember, your audience can't touch or feel your product, and they're going to want all the information they can to feel comfortable making the call and purchasing your product. So now it's time to complete the target with the black band. Make certain your infomercial contains the product's every imaginable, real benefit and feature. Every time you show one, you can potentially increase your sales by 2 or 3%. I remember the food dehydrator with Ron Papil. I had a friend, and I went into her house and was like, why do you have the food dehydrator? And she said, it makes potpourri. I'm like, what are you talking about? And I happened to watch the show a year later. I'm like, there's one mention that it makes potpourri. And my friend bought it because of that one mention. So if you mention several of these different things, you can end up with maybe a 10% increase in sales. squeezing in as many interesting features, benefits, and situations into your show as reasonably possible can very often make the difference between success and failure. Obviously, we're talking about a half-hour show here. 2 minutes, you have to, 2-minute spot and a 1-minute spot, you have to minimize the amount of issues you're putting in there. But on the half-hour show, think, what are the real benefits that your audience, your customers, will find appealing? So, finally, you have to remember the secret, that you're aligning the target with the arrow, and then you're going to find that hitting the bullseye is that much easier, more intuitive, and really not as hard as it looks. Thank you very much. Are there any questions? Feel free. Clap and I'll sit down quick. Thank you very much.